The storm started before nightfall, just as the artificial twilight dimmed across the domes of Outpost Delta 7 from the small circular window in Daniel's room. Lightning forked across the green-tinted sky, illuminating the jagged cliffs that made Carol feel less like a planet and more like a theatrical stage set to explode. The outpost vibrated with the low hum of its perimeter shield, and Daniel sat at his desk with a steaming cup of synthetic tea, trying to ignore the ominous whine of the wind clawing at the station walls like a hungry animal. He was reviewing repair logs for communications relays, half of which he was sure had been damaged purely out of spite. When the knock came, it wasn't the urgent buzz of military protocol. It was soft, hesitant, like someone unsure they were even allowed to knock. For a moment, Daniel thought it was the wind. Then it came again, firmer but still tentative. He opened the door and stared there. Dripping wet and shivering in the corridor light stood the alien girl. Her long ears, usually perked like blades of silver grass, hung low and limp under the weight of the rain. Her clothes were soaked through the loose fabric clinging to her slender frame. Her dark eyes, unreadable, luminous, met his. "Can I stay in your room, human?" she asked, teeth chattering slightly. Daniel blinked. "This is either a hallucination caused by cabin fever, or you've taken up interstellar door-to-door sales." Girl didn't laugh. She simply stood there, letting water pool beneath her like she was melting. He stepped aside with a resigned sigh. "Okay, come in before the floor decides to file a complaint." She entered silently. Her presence filled the tiny room in a way that made Daniel instantly aware of how cramped his living quarters really were. A desk, a cot, a chair with one wobbly leg, and a shelf stacked with half-read books and emergency rations. It wasn't much of a sanctuary, but he caught her eyes darting around as if it were a palace. "I remember you," he said, watching as she removed her outer cloak and hung it over the corner of his chair, dripping onto his sock drawer. She nodded. "Once you pulled me out of the ravine during the conflict, you didn't have to." "Yeah, well, I was trying to impress a girl." Turns out she was more into diplomatic hostilities than heroics this time. A flicker of amusement crossed her face. Her ears even twitched just slightly. Daniel handed her a towel, one of the scratchy gray ones, standard issue to the outpost. She took it with a slight bow and wrapped it around her shoulders. Still, she shivered. "Heat's sketchy," he said, adjusting the settings on the wall panel. "Our tech crew is about as reliable as a teleportation device built by raccoons. Earth creatures, chaotic, resourceful, addicted to garbage." Her brow furrowed. "So humans, but smaller." "Exactly." That earned him a quiet, reluctant snort. He offered her a thermal blanket, which she accepted more hesitantly than the towel, and gestured for her to sit on the cot. She did, perched like someone expecting the furniture to detonate. Daniel sat at his desk, swiving the chair slightly so he could watch her without making it too obvious. "Want some tea?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Is it safe?" "Depends. Are you allergic to poorly simulated peppermint?" The tea was poured in silence. He handed her the cup, and she cradled it with both hands, breathing in the steam like it was a sacred ritual. A soft hum escaped her lips. A tune, maybe, or just contentment. He watched her sip, then raised an eyebrow. "So what brings you to the dampest airbnb in the quadrant?" "I was traveling," she said simply, avoiding people. "The storm came faster than expected, and you remembered the guy who fumbled his way through rescuing you during a shootout. You had kind eyes." Daniel chuckled. "Must have been the helmet. It always makes me look heroic." She didn't reply, but her gaze lingered on him. Outside, the wind picked up again, howling through the corridors of the outpost. Somewhere in the distance, a generator coughed. Daniel made a mental note to fix that right after fixing his sudden, inexplicable urge to ask her 50 questions. "You know this isn't technically allowed," he said. "You being here, regulations and all." She nodded. "I'll leave if you want." He looked at her, small in the blanket, her ears slowly drying, her expression unreadable but calm, the same calm he remembered when he pulled her from the rubble. And she looked up at him, not with fear but with quiet, surreal curiosity, like she was already learning him. He stood and grabbed a spare thermal pad, spreading it on the floor. "You stay, but you sleep down there. If I snore, it's a biological defect, not a mating call." Her ears twitched again. "What is a mating call?" "I'll tell you when you're older." "I am older." "Then I'll tell you when I've had more tea." She settled onto the mat without complaint, pulling the blanket tighter. He turned the lights to low, letting the blue glow of the storm filter through the window. The silence That followed wasn't awkward, it was weightless. She didn't ask him for anything else, and he didn't ask her why. She'd come to him of all places, not yet they lay in separate silences, the kind that wrapped around the room like a second blanket. Daniel stared at the ceiling and wondered how long she'd stay. A night, a week, long enough to finish the tea and reprogram his coffee machine. He smirked at the thought. A soft voice from the floor drifted up. Human, yeah, do you always make jokes when you're uncomfortable? Only when I'm awake. A pause. They're not terrible jokes. High praise from someone who doesn't know what raccoons are. Another silence, then softly, just above a whisper, thank you. He turned his head toward her. For what for? Not asking me to explain. He didn't answer, just closed his eyes and listened to the storm, to the hum of the walls, too. The sound of someone who had once been a stranger, now breathing in the quiet, just beyond his reach. Daniel awoke to the scent of ozone and damp fabric, which was a step up from his usual morning breath. In metallic air recyclers, his body protested as he sat up, back sore from years of pretending chairs like his were ergonomic, and immediately noticed the floor mat was empty. Panic wasn't his default mode. It took at least 2 coffee units and a minor explosion before he truly committed to anxiety. But the blanket was folded, the cup rinsed and placed upside down on the desk. The only thing left behind was a single silver thread of hair caught on the blanket like a ghost of her presence. He pulled on his boots and uniform with all the enthusiasm of a man being drafted into war against sentient paperwork, and stepped into the corridor. The outpost was quieter than usual. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind streaks of condensation on the walls and flickering lights that made everything feel more haunted than operational. He found her in the greenhouse module. Of course, she stood among the hydroponic arrays like a figure misplaced in time. Hands gently brushing the leaves of a glowing color, the long strands of green-blue shimmered under her touch. Reacting to her presence with a slow ripple of bioluminescence, Daniel had seen the plants do that for water, heat, or the occasional curious maintenance drone, but never for someone standing so still. You know, he said from the doorway, there's a strict no petting the alien plants policy, very official, lots of forms involved. She didn't turn. They were humming. Daniel blinked. The plants. She nodded softly. Like they remembered something, he stepped inside, letting the door hiss shut behind him. Remind me to never take you to the engine room if you start telling me the coolant systems are whispering bedtime stories. I'm filing for early retirement. She finally looked at him, eyes tired but clear. Did I disturb your rest? He shrugged, only emotionally and chronologically. What time is it anyway? 7th quadrant cycle. Early. Daniel made a face so coffee. He leaned against a crate of nutrient supplements and watched her move through the rows. Her hair was still damp at the ends, curling slightly where the water had dried unevenly. Her ears, now standing tall again, twitched every so often. Once when a vine brushed her arm, once when he exhaled too loudly. You left before I could offer you breakfast, he said. We have 2 choices, rehydrated eggs or something I have named gray square. No, on dart. There were 13 before it. I tried to name them individually, but I ran out of colors and emotional states. Were any of them edible? Define edible. Her lips curved just slightly and she picked a small fruit from one of the trees. This is better. He raised an eyebrow. You're eating unregistered alien produce. That's at least 6 violation codes. You're a menace. She bit into the fruit. It made a soft crunch, then oozed something purple. You sound like a rules officer. I used to be one. She tilted her head. Really number, but I did once impersonate one to get out of a disciplinary hearing. I was very convincing until I arrested myself. The fruit disappeared between bites. Daniel handed her a cloth napkin from his jacket pocket. Because you never know when you'll be socially ambushed by juice, and she took it with another small bow. So he said, clearing his throat, was last night a one-time guest star appearance, or should I be preparing my room for a long-term roommate who talks to plants? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked back toward him and leaned against the edge of the crate across from him, still holding the half-chewed fruit core. There are people looking for me, she said quietly. Ah, Daniel said, the good kind of looking. Like you want a free starship, or the bad kind, like we're here to discuss your unauthorized acquisition of state secrets. She didn't smile this time. I broke a rule that narrows it down. This Planet is mostly rules a cultural one, a law older than your colony's oldest. Outpost I left when I wasn't supposed to I touch something that belonged to someone else did that someone else want. It back she hesitated they want silence and distance well he said, if I had a credit for every time someone wanted those two things I'd be drinking real coffee, and not whatever the machine. Coughs up when I push brew. I shouldn't be here, she said, not just in your room on this outpost in this sector but here you are. Yes, Daniel leaned his head back against the crate. I get it sort of a few years ago I was posted on a mining colony near the Ortun Belt got into an argument with a local governor about excavation rights. Ended up getting reassigned here that doesn't sound the same it's not but it. Still ended with me stuck on a rock drinking gray tea and sharing my room with a girl who talks to vines she lowered her gaze do you want me to leave number but I'd like to know if someone's going to show up with a plasma rifle and a vendetta I have a very limited shield budget, she studied him eyes narrowing. Slightly you joke too much some people knit I tell jokes it's how I process. Existential dread there was a long pause then very softly she said they don't. No I'm here yet but they will and when they do. Her eyes flicked to the ceiling then back to him I'll leave. He didn't like the way she said it like it was already decided and nothing he said could shift it but he didn't press. Instead he stepped forward, gently plucked the half-eaten fruit core from her hand, and tossed it into a disposal bin. Until then he said you're welcome to use my floor my terrible blankets and my questionable tea but we're upgrading breakfast tomorrow I'm requisitioning. Gray square number 1 best she blinked should I be concerned absolutely the greenhouse lights flickered as the storm outside picked up again. They stood there side by side listening to the hum of the plants and the faint electric murmur of the wind. It wasn't peace not quite, but it was something close. Daniel wasn't entirely sure. When his room became their room it happened in stages like an accidental science experiment that yielded a strangely comforting result one morning. There was an extra mug next to the sink another day. He found his socks folded horribly wrong mind you with the heels on the outside, and the tops rolled inside out but folded nonetheless, and sometimes at night he heard the soft rustle of her breathing not too close, not too far like a living punctuation mark in the quiet sentence of his existence. She hadn't said her name yet every time he almost asked. Something stopped him like names were keys, and once hers turned in the lock things would shift irrevocably so he stuck with you hey or the occasional misplant whisperer which earned him either a withering glance or a blink of genuine confusion, as if sarcasm were a foreign dialect. The outpost's routine kept rolling along indifferent to the two mismatched lives hiding in its quieter corners. Storms rolled in from the horizon like ink spilled across the sky, and the tech team barely kept the perimeter stabilizers from frying. The supply shuttle was late as always and Daniel's request for upgraded rations had been denied with the bold enthusiasm of someone who definitely didn't have to eat gray square number 15 so naturally. They made dinner together. He watched her hold the rehydration packet like it was a primitive artifact. You know it's food, right? He said, slicing the top with a thermal scalpel. Not a message from a dead civilization. It moves, she said. It's supposed to that's the protein slurry reacting to oxygen. It looks like it's breathing. Daniel peered at it. It does that sometimes. We think it's evolving. Honestly, it's the most ambitious thing on this space. She didn't look reassured. They ate on opposite sides of the room. Backs against the wall, trays balanced on their knees. The rain outside came in erratic burst, now drumming against the metal panels like fingers on a drum. Lightning flashed beyond the sealed window. Her eyes reflected it like mirrors, brief silent flares of silver. You've adjusted to this place fast, he said. She poked at her slurry. The humans here are too busy to ask questions. Except me. You were never busy. Hey, he said, mock offended. I'll have you know I have a very demanding schedule of packing, sighing dramatically and occasionally yelling at equipment that doesn't listen. To me, you forgot napping. That's his strategic unconsciousness, a corner of her mouth twitched. That was progress. He leaned back, propping his feet up on the storage unit nearby. You've been checking the boundary scans. She didn't answer, but he saw the flick of her ear. I know, because you keep recalibrating the motion filters, he said. I found the algorithm shifted to pattern match veil and gate signatures. Now she looked at Tim, I thought you wouldn't notice, you forget. He said I'm the king of boredom. I notice when a cable is 1 mm out of place. I didn't mean to interfere you. Didn't I? Just figured it might help to know that I know in case you were worried I'd think you were tampering with defense systems. To I don't know, call down an orbital dreadnought. I wouldn't. Good to hear. Dreadnoughts are bad for morale and for the lawn. She toyed with her food packet again, eyes distant. They don't use dreadnoughts, they send envoys. Quiet ones, of course. They do. Very considerate of them, I'm sure. Those quiet envoys come bearing very loud consequences. She looked at him, then a weight in her stare that briefly pulled all the humor from the room. Yes, she said. Silence followed. Daniel let it stretch until it softened around the edges. He wasn't afraid of silences anymore, not since arriving on this planet, where silence filled the days like fog and you learned to walk through it without flinching. Why'd you run? He asked. Finally, she didn't pretend not to understand. She set her tray down, hands folded in her lap like someone bracing for a difficult answer. I saw what was waiting for me, she said. I saw a future with walls not like your corridors, but binding. I was born into a treaty. Promised before I had breath to someone who doesn't know my voice. He let out a slow breath. An arranged alliance between species, politics, and flesh. I was the gift. Daniel winced. Yeah, that's a no from me. I don't care how shiny the wedding invites are. I couldn't do it, she continued. I studied your language. I found a way off the diplomatic vessel. And then I came here. I remembered your name. He blinked. Wait, you remembered me? I was at the border conflict 7 cycles ago. You spoke to one of the wounded, even though you were not ordered to. You shared your ration pack. I was the one translating. Daniel's brain stuttered. I thought you looked familiar. You wore a hood. I still have it. He shook his head in disbelief. You crossed half a galaxy because I gave someone dried fruit and an electrolyte bar. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't look at us like we were strange. Daniel scratched the back of his neck. To be fair, I was pretty concussed at the time. I might have been seeing double. She smiled, this time full and real. Outside, thunder cracked like a warning shot from the sky, but the sound passed quickly. The lights flickered, but didn't fail. Daniel rose and started clearing the trays. Well, if that's the case, I guess we should officially add fugitive royalty to our outpost census. Right after abandoned military personnel and talking houseplants. She stood with him, her voice quiet but firm. They'll find me eventually, and when they do, Daniel said, shoving the trays into the cleaning unit, we'll do what we do best. She tilted her head, which is, he grinned. Complain about it and improvise wildly. He handed her a cup of steam filtered tea, barely warm, faintly bitter, and vaguely reminiscent of citrus. She accepted it with both hands like it was a gift. Maybe, in a way, it was. The storm outside had calmed to a dull hiss, like the planet had simply grown bored of being dramatic. But inside the outpost, the atmosphere was shifting in a different way, subtle, warm, cautiously alive. Daniel woke up to the scent of something vaguely edible wafting through the air, which was unexpected because neither of them had dared touch the experimental food printer in over a week. It had a history of making things that looked like muffins but tasted like existential dread. He padded out into the common area and stopped dead. She was standing at the counter, her long ears twitching slightly, wearing one of his oversized thermal shirts like it had been made for her. It hung awkwardly, slipping off one shoulder, sleeves past her hands, making her look like a misplaced college student who had wandered into a spaceship by accident. The shirt had a faded graphic of a 21st century Earth sitcom that no one but Daniel remembered. The words sarcasm level critical blinked across the chest in glitchy ink. I used the printer, she said without turning around. I think it made soup, possibly by accident. Daniel squinted at the steaming bowl on the table. Soup from that machine, are you sure it's not just a warm puddle of apology? She glanced over her shoulder. There's a spoon. That's just bait. She smirked and handed him a cup, and he took it with the grim dignity of a man walking into battle. One cautious sip. Then he paused. Okay, that's not horrible. I modified the base program, she said. The default settings were confusing. That's putting it nicely. Last week it printed something that tried to crawl off the tray. I thought it was your pet. He gave her a sidelong look. You think I keep a gelatinous square as a companion? You talk to the walls. That's different. The walls have personality. The printer, it's just a chaotic evil in box form. She took a sip of her own creation, nodded in approval, and then gestured toward the viewport. The rain had stopped entirely, now revealing the jagged skyline of the alien jungle beyond the fence, glowing trees that shifted hues, spiny plants that pulsed faintly in rhythm as if breathing. Far in the distance, a storm beast moved, its silhouette towering and Slow, they're getting closer, she said quietly. Daniel followed her gaze. Stay clear of the compound, the field emitters are working, they won't be enough forever. He knew she was right. The fences were meant for wildlife deterrence, not diplomacy sabotage or planetary-scale hide-and-seek. But it was easier not to say that out loud. Instead, he motioned toward the table and sat so. How does this work in your culture if a fugitive princess shares soup with a human on an alien moon? Is that considered marriage or just mildly inappropriate? It depends on the soup. He choked on a laugh. Good answer. I'll log that under cultural mysteries that will get me accidentally married if I'm not careful. Her smile softened. I think in your terms this would be called a ceasefire between who. She hesitated. Between who I'm supposed to be and who I want to be. Daniel stirred his soup. That's a pretty heavy statement for breakfast. I didn't say it was easy, no. But I appreciate the honesty. He paused. So what do you want to be? She looked up. Long ears angling forward slightly, a subtle tell he was learning to read. Not someone traded for peace, not someone hidden. You're already not hidden, he said. At least not here, you're just slightly off the grid. That grid stretches farther than you think. Yeah, he said. Well, so does my tolerance for bureaucracy. So we're even. They ate in silence for a while, punctuated only by the distant hum of base systems recalibrating and the occasional mechanical sigh from the ventilation unit, which had started making sounds eerily similar to muttered complaints in recent weeks. Eventually, she set her bowl aside and stood. I want to see the archive. Daniel blinked. You mean the sealed sector? I want to understand what you were doing here before I arrived. Not much to understand. Scouting, soil analysis, local flora cataloging, most of it's automated now. Still, I want to see it. He stood too, stretching his arms. All right, but if you touch anything and it explodes, it's your fault. I'm more careful than that. He raised an eyebrow. You reprogrammed a food printer and fed me soup. That's practically a declaration of war. She didn't reply, just smiled enigmatically and motioned for him to lead the way. They made their way through the hall, past flickering panels and doorways etched with alien moss. The base was aging, its materials beginning to yield to the planet's quiet persistence, but it still held its secrets, especially in the archive wing. Daniel keyed in the access code and the heavy door slid open with a reluctant groan. Lights flickered on, revealing rows of data stacks, preserved samples, and display panels thick with dust. This place smells like dried regret, Daniel said. She ignored him and moved to the main console, brushing her fingers across the surface. The interface lit up under her touch faster than it had for him in months. Interesting, he muttered. It likes you better. It recognizes linguistic harmonics. She said your design copied our tone algorithms. I thought they just liked the sound of my voice. That too. Daniel coughed and pretended not to blush. He watched as she brought up visual records, maps, scanned data, energy signatures. Her eyes darted, rapidly taking it all in. Then her face changed. What is this? She asked, highlighting a series of encrypted logs. Old transmissions, he said, mostly static and noise, nothing actionable. No, not this pattern, she said, voice tightening. This frequency, it's Veilon. He frowned. You sure? I've seen it used in internal relays, hidden messages. Someone on this outpost sent a signal off-world 4 days ago. Daniel's pulse jumped. That's impossible. The comm tower's been fried for 2 weeks. Then someone fixed it or had help. She turned to him, her expression suddenly sharp and distant. They know I'm here. Daniel took a breath, then let it out slowly. Okay, that's not great. She stepped back from the console. They'll come soon, he nodded. Then we'll be ready. Her voice was quieter now. You don't have to help me. He met her gaze. I know, but I'm not really a let people get dragged off by empires kind of guy. I'm more of a make terrible soup and improvise a rebellion type. She laughed, just once, dry and real. And in that moment, Daniel knew 2 things for sure. 1, everything was about to get very complicated, and 2, he wouldn't change a thing. The outpost lighting had shifted again, a soft amber hue now clung to the corridors, flickering slightly as if the station itself were trying to decide whether to whisper a warning or light a scented candle. Daniel stood by the access hatch to the rooftop relay panel, wrench in one hand, a diagnostics pad in the other, and a vague sense of dread building steadily in the space where his caffeine levels should have been. Are you sure you're not just inventing work to look heroic? She asked from behind him, arms crossed, long ears twitching as they often did when she was skeptical or mildly amused. Absolutely, he said. It's part of my morning routine. Wake up, avoid dying, dramatically fix things that may or may not be broken. She walked over to the panel and peered at the exposed wiring. That's not even the correct schematic for this model, that's for an older relay. Daniel glanced down, no wonder. None of this makes sense, I thought the designers were just really into chaos theory. She reached past him, fingers deft and unhesitating, and began rearranging a cluster of LUDs. The panel made a low chime like a toaster that had achieved enlightenment there, she said. Now it won't loop the same diagnostic for another 12 hours. You're welcome. He blinked. Wait, did you just fix it? With confidence in zero sparks, I used to. Hotware cruisers back home, of course. You did. I had to take a 6-month course too. Learn how to reboot the base's toaster. You still burn things with it. It has settings that lie. She gave him a look that straddled pity and amusement, then turned away toward the edge of the rooftop. Beyond the fence, the jungle was quiet again, but the stillness had taken on a heavy, anticipatory weight. They're not sending a fleet, she said. That would attract attention. Daniel joined her hands in his pockets. So a strike team, more likely a cloaked lander infiltration, maybe someone we both. No, he didn't ask what she meant. He could guess. Royal connections were never simple, especially when betrayal wore the same uniform as duty. How long do we have? He asked. Hours, maybe less. That signal from the archive, it had an embedded pulse beacon. They know exactly where I am. Then let's make it difficult for them. She looked at him sidelong. You mean you have a plan? Don't be ridiculous. He said. I just have a toolbox, unresolved issues with authority and a fondness for dramatic exits. Her smile was quick and unexpected. That might be enough. They headed back inside, and for the next hour they worked side by side, rewiring the emergency lights, rerouting internal sensors, creating trip protocols that would flash false readings the moment an unidentified signature breached the compound's perimeter. Somewhere during their makeshift sabotage session, Daniel found himself holding a coil of wiring while she carefully nested a trigger node into the junction box. I feel like we're preparing a surprise party, he said. Except the guests are armed and might vaporize us. That's why there's no cake. We could improvise. I think the printer's emotionally stable today. She glanced at him. You keep giving emotions to the machines. If you heard the toaster hum when I reached for it, you'd understand. By the time they finished, the compound systems were a delicate lattice of real and illusory signals from orbit. It would appear stable from ground level. It would seem quiet, but if someone tried to enter, alarms would stay silent, but their movements would be tracked with eerie precision, like a haunted house that only noticed intruders. Daniel collapsed into the couch, exhausted. Now we wait. She didn't sit. She moved to the viewport again, her fingers resting on the sill, watching the jungle with the air of someone expecting a familiar ghost. Do you miss it? He asked. She didn't turn. Miss what? Home? She was quiet for a moment. Then I missed the idea of it, but the real thing, I'm not sure it was ever mine. He nodded slowly. I get that you do. Earth isn't much better, he said. Endless meetings, laws written by people who have never left the atmosphere, and don't get me started on Terran cafeteria regulations. She turned this time, brows raised. Cafeteria regulations, they once fined me for inappropriate condiment usage. I'd combined the wrong sauces. It caused a diplomatic incident with a culinary M. She laughed light and real. You're a walking disaster. It's part of my charm. Before she could respond, the console across the room let out a sharp tone, not an alarm yet, but a proximity ping. Daniel shot to his feet and crossed the room in 2 strides. Incoming. Subsonic approach. 1 life form, no vehicle signature. She was beside him now. Cloaked, probably could be scout class. He tapped through the interface there. Already past the Trian. How the hell did they get in that clothes? I told you, she said. They know the jungle better than anyone. Daniel looked at her. Do you? She gave a tight nod, enough to greet them properly. He hesitated. You want to go out there? I don't want to bring the fight into your walls. It's not my base anymore. She turned to him. Still, you offered me shelter. Let me protect it. He clenched his jaw, then nodded once. Fine, but we do this together. She didn't argue. Instead, she moved to the weapon locker and pulled out a stun baton modified for heavier targets. Daniel armed himself with a field disruptor and a small beacon jammer clipped to his belt. As they reached the outer hatch, he looked at her. Any chance this is just a local bringing soup and a peace treaty? She raised a brow. Do you want the diplomatic answer or the truthful one? I'll take the one where we don't die. No guarantees, he sighed. Figures. And then they stepped into the amber Evening light side by side, the door sealing behind them with a hiss too. Small figures in a wild world that had once been silent now holding its breath. The jungle was louder at night, not with sound. Most of the local fauna had retreated into a respectful silence, but with presence the air shimmered with hidden movement, the brush rustled not from wind, but from things that knew how. To move without being seen, Daniel adjusted the disruptor's grip in his hand and whispered, "Remind me again. Why we didn't just set fire to the trees and call it a day. Because we're trying not to die, and that plan is both illegal and incredibly stupid. Right? I forget those aren't mutually exclusive." She crouched near a rise in the earth, where the terrain dipped into a natural hollow, her long ears twitching as she listened. There's someone ahead, 30 breathing like they're trying not to. Maybe it's a really shy bush. She gave him a look. You joke a lot when you're nervous, and I'm nervous a lot when people try to kill me. They crept forward, every step measured. Daniel tried not to think about the dozen ways this could go wrong, or the unsettling fact that the vines near his feet glowed faintly when stepped on. He whispered, "Do the plants here always look like they're plotting something? They're symbiotic with local fungi, technically alive, technically curious, technically not helping." He froze as she held up a hand. They were close now, between the hanging roots of a massive felled tree. He could see the silhouette of someone crouched low, tall, lean, armored. The shimmer of adaptive camouflage flickered over their outline, failing slightly against the bioluminescence. She didn't hesitate. "Corin," she called softly. The figure stiffened. "I know, it's you, only you." Breathed like a hunted animal. A pause, then the shimmer peeled away like a curtain being drawn, and the man, definitely not local, definitely armed, stood up slowly. His skin was a shade darker than hers, his ears tipped with burn scars, his gaze hard and unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "That makes two of us." Daniel glanced between them. "I take it you two were friends. We trained together," she said. "He once threw a grenade into a latrine, thinking it was a ventilation duct. I told you that was classified." Corin muttered. Daniel grinned. "I like him already." Corin's gaze shifted to Daniel, assessing the human. "Daniel," she said before either of them could try to outstare each other, "he saved my life twice." Corin didn't look impressed. "That must have been inconvenient. You always did hate debt." "I'm not here to argue philosophy," Corin said. "I'm here to extract you." "Extract," she repeated, like cargo, like someone who's continued freedom is making the wrong people very nervous. Daniel stepped forward. "You mean the people who forged a peace treaty on paper, then sent hit squads in the dark?" "Stay out of this," Corin snapped. "Can't I already made tea and let her borrow my socks? I'm emotionally involved." Corin's lips twitched. It might have been the ghost of a smile. "You're lucky. I don't vaporize people based on attitude. I'm lucky in many ways. For example, I haven't tripped on a root and broken my spine yet, but the night is young." She stepped between them. "Corin, if you're here to kill me, then let's end it. But if you're here to offer exile in a box and pretend it's mercy, go back to them and tell them I refused." His expression shifted. Something heavy passed through his features. "You don't understand. It's not just about you. They think you accessed the relic. They're afraid of what you found." "I didn't find anything." She said. "It was damaged, but even if I had that knowledge, isn't theirs to control?" "They disagree," Daniel muttered. "I'm shocked." Truly. Corin's eyes flicked to him again. "You're going to get her killed." Daniel stepped up just enough to match his stance. "Or maybe I'm the only reason she's still alive." There was a long silence. Then Corinite, "I'll give you 12 hours. After that I report back. And you'll be hunted properly." "That's generous," she said, surprised. "No, it's cowardice. I don't want to be the one to drag you back, but someone will." He engaged his cloak again and disappeared into the shadows like a ghost that had places to be. Daniel let out a breath. He didn't know he'd been holding. "Well, that was awkward. He could have killed us," she said quietly, "but he didn't. That counts for something, right?" She nodded, but her posture was stiff. "Tense. We need to leave the outpost." Daniel stared at her. "You want to give up the only place with decent plumbing? They'll track the systems. It's only a matter of time." He sighed. "So where do we go?" "To the Crater Valley," she said. "There's an old survey station. If the relic pulse came from anywhere, it's there. We might find what they're afraid of, and if we don't, then we run, and maybe we stop running." Daniel looked toward the distant lights of the outpost. "I left Earth for adventure. I got rain, mold, and political sabotage, and now I'm about to hike through hostile terrain in the middle of the night with a fugitive princess who may or may not be carrying ancient secrets in her brain. She blinked. You make that sound like a complaint I left out the part where I'm wearing damp socks. She smiled. My socks exactly. It's tragic. They started back toward the outpost for supplies, their steps light, despite the weight of what was coming, and for the first time in a long while Daniel wasn't just reacting to the universe, he was walking straight into its heart with an alien girl beside him and no map, but the stars. The crater valley looked like the moon had tried to punch through the planet and left a dent in its pride. Shattered rock formations twisted out of the mist like broken teeth, while steam vents hissed softly from beneath fractured terrain. There was no bird song here, no rustle of alien lives, just the deep silence of a place forgotten by time. Daniel tightened the straps on his pack and muttered, "This is either where legends are born or people vanish without a trace." "You forgot the third option," she said, scanning the horizon, "which is we find what we're looking for, and no one believes us. Perfect. I've always wanted to be a crazy footnote in a declassified document." They climbed carefully, the trail up the ridge crumbling underfoot. Her balance was better than his alien physiology, or just a general talent for not falling into ravines. He wasn't sure. Every time he slipped, she reached out without looking, like she had some internal radar for impending human faceplants. The old survey station sat crooked on the cliff's edge, half swallowed by rock slides, a circular structure of faded synth metal, its antenna long rusted into jagged curves. Daniel wiped a smear of mud from the access panel and plugged it. The cracked tablet she'd salvaged from their last encounter with friendly fire. "Think it'll boot? It's older than both of us," she said, "but the core system should still hold data." A low hum answered her as the door gave a reluctant hiss and slid open. Inside, the stale air tasted like dust and old regrets. Broken consoles lined the curved walls, and in the center a spherical projection rig blinked to life. The room lit up in a lattice of stars and blue lines, an interactive stellar chart with annotations in a script Daniel couldn't read, but that made her breath hitch. "This isn't just a survey station," she said softly, "it's a relay node. A translation point for what information from before the Accord. This predates even my people's arrival here." Daniel squinted at a section of the map where a pulsing marker hovered. "That little dot looks like it's laughing at me. It's a signal relay buried dormant. They thought it was a natural formation, but if we reactivate it, you'll light a beacon that tells the whole sector where we are." She looked at him. "Yes." Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "Okay, but what if we just hear me out? Don't activate ancient space relics that paranoid governments want to murder us over, then everything stays the same. I stay hunted. We keep running." He sighed. "You're really not big on the whole low stress lifestyle, are you?" "No," she said, smiling faintly, "and you're still here. I blame your ears. Very distracting." She moved to the control node, fingers brushing over keys like they were piano notes from a childhood song. The projector flared brighter now. The station rumbled, and beneath their feet the earth vibrated in a slow pulse. Something deep underground shifted, woke, and reached for the sky. For a long time there was silence, then the hologram expanded. Images flickered, architecture that didn't match any known species, a voice humming in layered tones, data sequences that poured through the tablet's buffer like water through cracked glass. Daniel caught only fragments, but even he could see what it meant, a record not of war or conquest, but communication, a failed peace offering from a civilization no one remembered, buried before it could be answered. Lost in the bureaucracy of fear, she watched it unfold with wide eyes. "This is what they wanted to erase, because it makes them look stupid?" Daniel asked. "Because it proves we weren't the first, that war wasn't inevitable." He leaned back against the wall, exhaling. "So what now? You send this to everyone and hope the angry assassins take the rest of the year off?" "No," she said, "we send it to someone who will listen, a scholar, a historian, someone with more reach than me, and then we vanish." Daniel blinked. "I was kind of hopping for something with more vacation days." She looked at him. "I know someone who owes me a favor on the 5th moon of Havari. Do they have food that doesn't try to bite back?" "Usually." He grinned. "Sold." They left the station just as the sky split open with a low roar. 3 scout ships tearing through the cloud cover, trailing bright contrails like knives. Too late, the signal was out. They ran down the ridge, slipping through the jungle paths, as wind from the ship stirred leaves into flurries. Corin met them near the base, leaning against a tree like he'd been there the whole time. You lit it, he said. No use pretending otherwise, Daniel said. She pressed the glowy buttons. I tried to stop her. She bit me. She didn't deny it. Corin looked at her unreadable, then nodded. There's a transport hidden 30 clicks west. No flight plan, no trace. You want out? That's your best chance. You're helping us? She asked, suspicious. I'm pretending I didn't see you, which is different, but maybe I'm tired of watching us make the same mistakes. She stepped forward and hugged him sudden and tight. He didn't hug back, but his eyes softened. Tell them, she said. Tell them the truth. No one listens to old soldiers, he muttered, then shout louder. They didn't look back through heat and rain and a final mad dash across a ravine where Daniel was absolutely sure he broke a rib. He didn't. They made it to the clearing where the ship waited, old, rusty, but alive as they buckled in. She looked at him. Are you sure? He raised an eyebrow. About trusting you or about leaving behind the most thrilling near-death experiences of my life? Yes, he smiled. I'm in. Ship lifted, creaking and growling like an angry dragon, and rose above the jungle below. The crater pulsed one last time, a beacon flickering across the stars, quiet, defiant, eternal in the silence between them. He reached out and took her hand.